All right, season 5, episode 3 of CBB Review Courtside. Mat Mlodzinski, along with a name that you might remember, Joe Jackson, used to write for us here on the site. But he continues to cover college basketball, especially in the Big Ten. And today we'll be talking about his team, Purdue, the Boilermakers. Another great season last year.
Yeah, it was a super fun season to be able to cover and watch that team be able to do what they're able to do. Obviously, after the previous season, losing to the 16th seed, making the championship run, running into Yukon, just a juggernaut, but still just a really fun season. Look back on it.
29 wins in each of the last 3 seasons, 46 and 14 in the Big Ten over the period of that. Obviously, last season, 34 wins, so really the height there. But, Purdue's just been on a roll. I mean, for you, I know you've kind of been like a lifelong Purdue fan as well. How cool has it been to see Matt Painter just completely take this program to the next level?
I mean, yeah, it's really been elite to watch, right? And everybody knows, right? Purdue's not always getting the top 5-star dudes. Like Edey was ranked 400 and whatever he was ranked, right? Like that's a pretty common thing is he's developing guys. Braden Smith, right around 150 to 200, somewhere in there. But then to see last year, like to see them finally make that Final Four, and I was there covering in person in Detroit when they beat Tennessee in the Elite Eight. Like you could just tell how much it meant to everybody. Obviously, the video of Edey immediately running up and hugging Painter like in the handshake line. Like that's obviously something that's been shown a lot. But just like the fan base reaction in the arena, it was probably 80-20 Purdue fans. Detroit was only a few hour drive from Purdue. And just seeing like how many stayed for everything and just how packed it was even after they won and the nets were being cut down. You could tell it meant a lot, and this program means a lot to a lot of people. And Painter has it rolling right now, and maybe they'll presumably take some sort of step back this year, but like Painter's just going to keep doing his thing and keep churning out good teams.
Yeah, we'll get to a lot of that you just talked about in a little bit. I mean, did you think that Painter would ever really get to this point, though? Because he's always been a good coach. Purdue's kind of been a basketball school. But, I mean, recently, it's been another level. I mean, did you ever kind of envision this happening?
Yeah, I think Painter's one of the best coaches in the country. And there's obviously a ton of postseason woes, and everybody knows about him, and that's very fair. But my thought was like, when you give Painter like that good of a coach, that many cracks, eventually it's going to happen. I mean, you look at Virginia and what they did there. Like, eventually that run's going to happen. I think he's going to have more in him as well. But yeah, I also do think like those postseason losses it helped in the long run. I think as he got through more and more, he realized like at times he needs to switch up what he wants to do. He's been on record saying he doesn't like running pick and rolls. Like it's just not something he likes doing. Last year, when you have Braden Smith and Zach Edey, he's like, okay, I need to run more pick and rolls. I need to get more movement that way. And so I think his ability to adjust now and be more open to new concepts and things like that, those have all come from the losses. And now that's kind of built him to be where he's at now and hopefully getting a lot more deeper postseason runs coming up.
Well, this year's going to look a lot different for Matt Painter and Purdue fans and people across the country because Zach Edey, he's a Memphis Grizzly. He's no
Yes.
longer on the Purdue Boilermakers. We know his story, right? If you follow college basketball, even if you don't follow college basketball, but you're just into sports in general, you know who Zach Edey is. I mean, he was kind of the face of the sport, give or take, for the past year or two, and he's no longer there. I mean, what are the expectations? What are the thoughts around Purdue without their star center? I know you guys have had a lot of star centers in the past, but this one just seems a little bit different.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think anybody's going to downplay Zach Edey being lost. Like you're replacing a 2-time National Player of the Year, one of the most productive players we've literally ever seen. Like that's not an easy thing to fill. I do think on the flip side, though, the expectations are still to be very competitive and compete for a Big Ten championship. And then from there, it's, you get hopefully a pretty good seed in the postseason and knock off a game or two early and see where you're at from there. Part of that for the Big Ten this year is it's so wide open, right? There's nobody that's like clear cut top. And I know Greg Waddell from Sleepers Media, he posted the Torvik screenshot every single Big Ten team is projected by Torvik between 12-8 and 8-12 in Big Ten play, all 18 teams. So it's like, it's so wide open, and Purdue definitely feels like they should be in that top mix. Braden Smith's obviously going to take a huge jump. TKR is going to be a guy that takes a jump, but there's going to have to be guys off the bench, and just how they play, it's going to be different. But with that, I think Purdue fans, I guess around Purdue for sure, like still believe in Matt Painter, believe Braden Smith's one of the best point guards in the country. And when you put those two things together with some good players around them, still think that they should be competing at the top of the Big Ten.
So obviously, no Zach Edey, a lot of other good players on this Purdue team, but we all know that the big man has been kind of the identity of Purdue, right? There's been a lot of them over the years. You've got 7'2" Will Berg. You've got a freshman 7'4" Daniel Jacobson. Do you think that those guys will kind of go into a similar role as Zach Edey? Maybe it'll take them another year. Or do you think that something's going to change here and Purdue's really going to start being more guard-oriented, guard-focused?
I mean, the real answer is we're just going to see this but from my point of view, I think like the best lineup Purdue will have is TKR at the 5. And so it will be Smith, Lawyer, Colvin, most likely, Heidi at the 4, and TKR at the 5. You're giving up a lot defensively, but TKR can be a guy that you can feed in the post. It will be more perimeter oriented at that point. Hopefully, like if things kind of work, I would assume it's going to be a little bit more up-tempo offense. It is going to be a lot more pick and roll. It's going to be, Painter said this year, there's going to be more of a focus on getting Fletcher Lawyer like specific looks. Thinking back to like the Ryan Klein days, like that year, like getting him a lot of those looks, coming off handoffs, coming off pin downs, getting him movement shooting. Like last year was a lot of, there was definitely still sets for Fletcher Lawyer, but it was a lot more of like, he was the benefactor from others creating looks, whether it be Edey or Braden. This year, I think him, even Colvin could probably be thrown into it of like, they're going to be like sets run for them. But with that being said, I think like even realistically, that's going to be 15 to 20 minutes, maybe 25 if there's, depending on matchup. That still leaves 15 to 25 minutes at the center spot. And that absolutely is going to be some sort of mix of Jacobson, Berg, even maybe First at times could be thrown in there, where now they have this big, obviously First is like 6'11", but he's really athletic. But Berg and Jacobson, true 7-footers. Jacobson is an elite rim protector. I've compared him, and I'm not like, honestly, even just, I could see his career playing out this way of like a Ryan Kalkbrenner from Creighton, of like dominant rim protector, maybe doesn't play like an insane amount right away, but by the end, by his senior year, considered one of the best defenders in the entire country. I think Jacobson has that to him. And so if that can play out for his freshman year, he's going to get minutes. Berg is the big kind of wild card to me of, he was really productive in limited, like his production came in garbage time, but he was also insanely productive. And so we'll finally get to see what he actually looks like. He's obviously backing up Edey. Like he's just not going to get minutes, but we'll get to see what he actually looks like, at least at some point.
Well, that's your breakdown of Purdue basketball for this upcoming season. Obviously, the Boilermakers still expected to be one of the top teams in the Big Ten. Will they get to 34 regular season wins or wins overall? Who knows? But you have to think that Matt Painter is going to keep them there, and there's a lot of talent on this team. If anyone goes to your Twitter, your X page, again, I had it up there. I'll click it back up for a sec, at Joe Jackson CBB. They'll see the analytics, the game breakdowns that you post. You go in depth on it. Is there maybe a number, a breakdown that you have for this season above the rest? And I know that's kind of an odd question, but is there something that you've seen from Purdue and doing all your research that you think jumps out the most this season?
That's a good question. I think one thing that's looked out in terms of the numbers. Can I find the specific numbers now that I'm talking about it? I have it. I know it's somewhere in my post. There it is. So last year, was Zach Edey off the floor. Only 160 minutes for TKR on the floor without Zach Edey. Not the biggest sample size. But when you take his per 40 minutes stats, 18 points, 10 rebounds a game. Then when you take that to maybe 30 minutes, closer to probably what he will play, 13.5 points, 7.5 rebounds, 1.5 assists. So it's like he was still productive in the non-Edey minutes. And I think that stat line, 13.5 points, 7.5 rebounds, like that's very reasonable for, I think, TKR in about a 30-minute role, being the predominantly post-featured guy. So I guess that's definitely one big thing that kind of stands out. Also, just the amount of 3-point shooting they're returning with Heidi, Colvin, Fletch, Braden. Like they lose some shooting for sure, but they return an insane amount of shooting still.
Sure, definitely going to be an interesting team to watch. And yeah, I mean, Purdue has guys. People look at Zach Edey last season. They forget that there's a lot of guys on this team that were, playing perimeter basketball. It wasn't just feed the post, feed the post, feed the post. You guys, of course, did that when you needed to and when you had to,
Yeah.
but other guys stepped up.
Yeah.
I'd be remiss, Joe, if I didn't talk about the tournament woes for Matt Painter. It's a bit of a weird thing to say, though, coming off of an appearance in the national championship, right?
Yep.
So, I do want to say, hey, it looks like Painter and Purdue have kind of gotten past that. You guys were able to reach the final game of the season. Without winning the tournament, though, do you think that maybe just getting there, just getting to that championship, getting to the Final Four, that maybe that's a burden off his back?
Yeah, I think for sure. Getting the Final Four was gigantic for him. And this program, and obviously I'm sure there'll still be talks and stuff come tournament time of what is Purdue going to do, but you can't specifically say that like, oh, he can't make a Final Four anymore.
Sure.
Purdue can't do it. Like they've shown they can do it. Yes, it was on the back of Zach Edey, and Zach Edey had one of the greatest individual performances in the Elite Eight that I've ever seen. Like 40 points, it's like 15 rebounds, the game-winning block against Dalton Connect. But still, like Painter has shown now that he can do it. I mentioned earlier, like I think Painter has learned from especially the past few years of really early exits, and has learned kind of just how to be able to adjust and be able to now have more of a chance in March, right? At the end of the day, it's still a toss-up. You could lose to a 16 seed because you shoot super poorly and turn the ball over a ton. That obviously is always a possibility, but I think the way that Painter is starting to build the roster more, I mean, this is going to be the most athletic team specifically this year that he's had in a long time, maybe ever. I don't know. And so you see him, I think, starting to adjust that way and be like, hey, I can still do it my way, but I probably need to adjust slightly so that way come March, we're able to, handle these smaller teams that are going to press and that are going to, just throw these junk defenses at us and things like that. Cause like, that's always been the weird thing is, they've lost to these low digits or these high digit seeds. They were dominant in non-conference play. It's not like they can't beat these teams and they don't beat really good non-conference teams. I mean, they haven't lost in 2 years in non-conference play while having arguably the hardest schedule the past 2 years in non-conference. It's just come March, things happen. And I think Painter has started to learn from it a lot more, and not saying it won't ever happen again, but I think the pathway for them to keep getting deeper and deeper runs is definitely there now.
Yeah, and anyone can be susceptible to it. We've seen it with Virginia and the turnaround that they had. Obviously, you guys one step short last year, but still, the turnaround is remarkable, and the guys understood the assignment. If you look at last year's championship game against Connecticut, I mean, in my eyes, Zach Edey, in that game at least, who knows what Donovan Clingan will turn into, who knows what Edey's NBA career will go to, but I figured Purdue had the advantage there. Do you think that you would have done anything differently, though, as a team to overcome Yukon? I mean, I don't know, 15-point loss. It's tough. Yukon was a great team.
Yeah.
Is there something else that should have happened?
Option one would just be not play Yukon, probably. Like that's probably the best option. But no, I mean, within that, I think knocking down the limited threes they got would have been big. That was UConn's game plan, was we are going to live with Edey dropping 40 on us. We're going to live with Braden pull-ups. Nobody else is touching the ball. And they executed it perfectly. I think, like, from a strategic standpoint, yes, like maybe if you could have tried to scheme like Lawyer open a little bit, like running more stuff for him, that probably could have helped a bit. But it's also tough because it's like, if UConn's giving your National Player of the Year one-on-one coverage and Edey is going to work, like, why aren't you going to throw it to him every single time? But I think when I think back on the game, there's definitely a few key points, though. Like, there was just some make or break points where it's like, because that first 10, 15 minutes, that was competitive. And Purdue was, even the first half, I think they were down 6 at half. there was early in the second half, though, was the big thing where Yukon was just able to come out on a run. And the big thing was they were able to get all like the loose balls and all of that little stuff. Like I remember specifically a play, Purdue, great defensive possession, force an insanely tough shot. They don't get the defensive rebound. Yukon immediately drills a three, right? And Yukon was the best in the country of, if you make a little mistake, we are immediately making you pay.
Yep.
And so looking back, it's those little things of just like being able to gather defensive rebounds. You couldn't give that Yukon team multiple chances, things like that. Yes, maybe trying to get 3-point shooters open a little bit more would have been beneficial, but it's also like that's assuming Yukon doesn't do anything. And then Painter's always said that's, you try to do something, but there's also a whole other team trying to do something as well.
Right. You change something up, you never know what Yukon has to counter that. And yeah, it's all in the past now. But again, great run for Purdue last year. Obviously this year, going to be a lot different of a team, some new faces, but a lot of the same faces as well. So should be a team with a lot of chemistry, I'm assuming. And Matt Painter's going to figure something out. Joe, appreciate having you on the show today. Again, make sure to give him a follow, Joe Jackson CBB on X. You have some really great content on there, and we always love having you on.
Yeah, appreciate you having me on. Always fun to talk hoops. Always fun to come back on.
And again, for everyone listening, make sure again to follow, subscribe, and always taking suggestions. Let us know who you want to hear next. See ya.